Good afternoon, and this week on the latest episode of The Big Show, film critic and programmer of the Over the Rhine Film Festival in Cincinnati, TT Stern-Enzi will be our special guest as we discuss the historical perspectives of Black images in film. Plus, show correspondent Wilson Morales will join us as we discuss the latest in Hollywood. Plus, we'll have a review of the documentary John Lewis, Good Trouble. All in the latest episode of Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. Let's go. All righty. So everybody, welcome back. I just want to introduce my new glasses first. Look. Word. My new haircut. Wilson, you feeling all of this right here?
About time.
Wilson, how are you?
I'm good. You know, I'm here in New York, in the Bronx, you know, still hunkered down. You know, I haven't really gone far throughout this whole time, you know, but we do what we do, you know.
Wait. And Charles, how are you over there? Just munching away?
I'm taking a break now. Actually, I have been traveling. Last week I was in North Carolina, but now I'm back, so I'm good. I'm good. Keeping busy.
Right. Well, we're gonna get to Charles and what Charles has going on, but we have Wilson Morales who joins us at the top of every show and breaks down what's going on in Hollywood. Wilson, what's going on, brother? Guess a lot. You've been doing a lot.
Well, you know, obviously every week is who's on first in regards to theatrical release dates with the studios. You know, initially, you know, the last time we spoke, it was going to be Tenet, followed by Mulan, followed by Wonder Woman. Changes have happened, obviously, rapidly because, as you know, New York and LA, the two biggest markets for theaters, have, you know, seen their cases either rise or simmer down. Nothing's at a safe zone yet. And so there's been musical chairs as far as the release dates. Tenet moved the date, which then put Mulan at first. And just recently, Mulan moved its date from July 24th to now August 12th. And then Tenet has moved to July 31st. And Wonder Woman has moved to October. So pretty much July is a wash in terms of big name movie studios trying to put it out there. Nobody wants to be the first one out the gate,
Wilson,
you know.
Wilson, July is a wash. August is going to be a wash. September, I promise, will be a wash. But continue.
You know, so like we'll see how things develop in August. You know, that's going to be the interesting component. If they move out of August, then the year's a wrap. You know, and moving on, you know, the Toronto Film Festival put out at least a press release saying they're going to continue to go on. They're going to have a home edition, I guess, in regards to the films. And they said they're going to still have films in theaters and they're going to showcase films, you know. And they announced a few films that are going to go out to Toronto, including Concrete Cowboys, I believe it is, that stars Idris Elba, and Bruise, which is the directorial debut of Oscar winner Halle Berry. So those are two films on the radar. They're appearing to go to Toronto. The question is, who's gonna fly out, pay money for hotel, and risk going to theater screening to screening, theater to theater on a daily basis? You know, bad enough. We're already talking about, like, do we even want to go to the theater to see one movie? Are you gonna go to Toronto in September to see 4 movies a day in 4 different theaters? You know, just basically, I don't want to say exposing yourself. I don't want to put anybody at risk, but you know that's essentially what's gonna happen.
Well, first of all, Canadians don't want to be at risk, so I don't know if we're going to be allowed. And as I explained to my good friend Wilson Morales earlier this week, I think there's a quarantine period if you come in from another country. So I don't know how that's going to work out unless you got about a month of vacation to burn. You can go to Canada 2 weeks earlier than the festival, kind of quarantine, and then attend the festival. I don't know of anybody that's going to do that that's in our group. But, you know, Wilson, you the man. We believe in you.
You know, at the end of the day, you know, you also have to realize, you know, whenever you plan for these festivals, a lot of times people plan early just because, you know, you want to get a cheaper rate on hotels and airlines. And like, you know, one, you're not trying to, you know, you can't be that optimistic thinking like, oh, things are going to be good in October. So you're not even trying to book a flight. You know, for some people who do Airbnb, forget that. I can't imagine anybody trying to, you know, give up their apartment or a house and let people come in there for a period of time. You know, during this pandemic. So there are losses everywhere. Like I said.
And ironically, this would be the time now to start planning for TIFF if we were doing TIFF. TT, who's coming on a little later on in the show, has gone the last 15 years. And he's like, nah, bro, I'm out the TIFF game this year. I went last year for the first time. Wilson, I know you were there hanging out. I told you the funny story last year, Charles, that Wilson is so busy in Toronto, Wilson doesn't even acknowledge you. He just kept walking past me up and down the street. I was like, hey, there's Wilson.
Well, the funny thing is, Toronto is just like Sundance. You're always on the go. Each of us have our agenda. Obviously during the day, you're definitely trying to see film after film.
Trying to see movies, man.
Yeah. And there's really no break in between unless you plan it out like that. So as much as we all want to get maybe at night when there's a break in the action, but during the day we're all trying to capture as much as we can. That it's like, hey, how's it going? I'll see you later. Text me, whatever.
No, I'm laughing because Charles is over there. Oh, his face is tight because Charles hasn't done Sundance or TIFF. He's like,
yeah, that's how I was at Sundance.
Because this was supposed to be the year for TIFF for me, and thanks Corona.
Yeah. So far throughout this time, last week would have been ABFF, next week would have been Essence Festival, and sometime in July would have been Comic-Con, and all those three, events are gone, and obviously Toronto is, I'm not sure which is the one, the Venice Film Festival may still happen.
Yeah, Venice is talking about it's happening, but I don't know if you're going to have any American releases or any Americans there because, again, the EU doesn't want Americans because, we're not good stewards of the coronavirus, of COVID-19. So people are like, nah, y'all keep y'all infested butts inside your borders.
No, definitely. Festivals is the attraction for, a lot of people from all over the country. And at the same time, it's hard with these festivals because as you saw what happened with South by Southwest or Tribeca, they try to do a home edition, but, they didn't put out, at least for the press that was covering them, any of the major films.
Right.
So I can't imagine Toronto trying to do that and sending out links to over 500 press people. It's one thing if we're all in a theater, we see it all at once, and then there's a buzz online. But to do it, but to send out a link, I can't imagine everybody's going to try to do that.
Wow, brother. Like I said, man, I know you're dealing with some family obligations, man. You're outside. You're giving us a snapshot of New York in the summer, Gotham in the summer. I always love Wilson, man, because we never know where. Wilson is the only Zoom person I know who doesn't have a physical Zoom office location. He's doing it. I'm waiting for next week. You're going to be in the subway like, yeah, I'm down here. But don't mind, that's a train going behind me. Don't even trip.
It's always good to be on the go.
I know that's right. So Wilson,
good to be on the go.
So where can people read your content, my brother?
You can find it over at Black Film and the same words you use for social.
All right. Okay, sir. You go forth. You do what you do. I love that look on his face. It's great. Wilson, you take care, brother. Thank you. And I will be in touch with you.
Thanks for having me on.
I will be in touch with you after the show because I love that look on your face.
We'll continue to talk. Okay, guys.
You take care, brother.
Stay safe.
All right.
Love Wilson, man.
Bye.
Love Wilson. Take care, man. All right. And of course, that is Wilson Morales. We have him on at the top of every show every week. I will talk to Charles after the show because, I don't want to spoil it. That's why I asked him like that. And we got that look like, where can people read your content, Wilson? And you saw the look on his face like, it's a long story. So, Charles, we got.
Yeah, I was wondering what that was about.
Yeah, we'll talk. So, Charles, first of all, man, you and I talked a couple of hours ago. And, brother, first of all, I want to tell people and just kind of give you an opportunity to talk about something because it shows your heart, who you are as a man. And, we always talk about integrity is what happens when you're in the dark and what you're doing when nobody's watching. the fact that you and I not just work together on this show, but during the week, we sort of work together. We don't see each other, but we're doing the same things. Tell the people, man, about your nonprofit and what you have going on, because in these tight times where we got between 20 to 40 million people out of work, we've got over 125,000 people dead because of this coronavirus. We've got COVID-19. That's over 2 million Americans that have been impacted. Talk about your nonprofit and your vision and what you guys are doing.
Oh, I'm the operational director at a program called the Noah's Ark, and we repurpose foodstuffs. So today, before the show, we were giving out, for instance, 12 pallets of bananas, 6 pallets of plantains, 14 pallets of bread, various meats and cheeses and all kinds of stuff like that. We're reaching out to the community at this time where a lot of people can't get out, haven't been able to get out, don't have the money to go get food like they used to. On Wednesday, we gave out 9,000 half gallons of milk.
Wow.
To people who just are just in need. And so, we made all these partnerships with the community where we can get these items and get them out to people who, like I said, are in need and just are desperate at this time for food. And you should see the joy on people's face when they get food that they've been missing. I mean, you have children that go to school, used to go to school and get food from lunches at school, and because of this COVID, they can't get the nutrition that they used to get, like the milk and the bread and the eggs and the cheese that they used to get at school is now missing. So
right.
we're filling that gap by being able to go out into the community and serve them in these manners. And it's a lot of work, but it's rewarding at the same time.
So for people who are interested, A, in more information, and B, may want to either donate their time or other resources to Noah's Ark, man, how can they get in touch with you, Charles?
We have a Facebook page for Noah's Ark where you can go get on and you can see everything that we're doing, everything that we have planned. So if you want to volunteer, you're in the DC area, you want to come out and work, hit us up on the Facebook site and we'll get in contact with you.
Now, what if they don't have Facebook, man? What if they old school?
If they don't have Facebook, we don't have I mean, I could give out my personal phone number, but I'm not going to.
No, I'm not giving your personal phone number. I could give you a personal phone number, but not you.
No.
That was a joke, by the way.
I got you.
All right, brother. All right, well, hey, man.
Reach to us through Facebook, and we can get you what you need to know. And if you're a provider, if you have foodstuffs that you would like to disseminate instead of throw away or get rid of, get in contact with us through the Facebook site. We'll get in contact with you as well.
Well, man, first of all, I want to commend you because, I've heard these stories of people during this time who have undergone, like we talked earlier, that, there's been some major financial implications with the loss of income. You had rent protections, which expired. So a lot of people are now, you're looking at mass evictions. You and I talked about this off air last week. We have been blessed, brother. I'll just tell you that straight up. I mean, not only have we been blessed with work, but with physicality, their bodies have been reshaped. You've lost weight. I've lost a significant amount of weight and continue to lose it. So this pandemic, even though, it reminds me, and I will just for a second be spiritual, that it reminds me sometimes that in life, in order to get to the other side of where there's a land of milk and honey, sometimes you got to walk through HELL with some gasoline draws on, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but you just got to focus. And I mean, I'm being funny, but again, I'm not being funny. That sometimes you got to focus, man, when you're in the valley of the shadow of death, and just put those blinders on and just keep on walking, man, and have faith that when you get to the other side, there is something waiting that is going to be for your benefit, man. So, brother, one more time, I commend you. And now I'm going to welcome to the show, as we do a quick pivot, of a colleague, a friend, a brother that I've been in contact with recently. He is the film festival programmer at the Over the Rhine Festival in Cincinnati. He had me there a couple of years ago. Cincinnati is a very interesting city. I wish I could have saw more of where the brown people were, CT. I'm not gonna mess with him because I got more rights and lefts. Without any further ado, the man who's going to miss the Toronto International Film Festival for the first time since Barack Obama was president, TT Stern-Enzi. What's going on, man?
What's up, man? How you doing? Why you got to bring that up?
Man, because we were just talking about it before you got on the air, because Wilson was like, you know, TIFF is still moving forward with films. And I was like, okay. You know, all these folks that want to move forward with outdoor events when A, we don't have a vaccine, and B,
right.
The public doesn't have trust to go anywhere. Which is why the Lakefront Film Festival, which is our festival here, we put it on ice about a month ago, because even if we had the festival, nobody was coming.
Right.
Nobody's coming. And you guys, you know, I'll give you an opportunity, TT, to talk about your situation, because I think you guys moved your festival date from September to February of 2021.
Right. We made the decision, and as a matter of fact, I tell people this all the time. We made this decision before COVID and the quarantine or any of that was set up. We moved from like that September, October timeframe to February of 2021 because we felt like in terms of our festival and the organizers, that fall time of the year, especially here in Cincinnati, is a very busy time of the year. So we kind of wanted to get away from that. It gave us some opportunities to do some fundraising in different ways. So the switch made sense for us as an organization. And then, of course, everything else happened. And literally, as soon as, you know, quarantine starts, and I'm looking at other festivals that are trying to do that early pivot in March and April, I got to sit back and, to be quite honest, really sit back and kind of check in with the Film Festival Alliance, hear what other people were doing, and sort of thought to myself, man, we dodged a major bullet by making this move. And again, I'm still not entirely sure. We have been talking recently about the idea that we won't stick even with that February 2021 timeframe either, because for us, since our festival is so focused on accessibility and people with disabilities, and here in Cincinnati, our concern is we as a city may not, again, if we don't have a vaccine, we're not going to be ready to do live in-person events and comfortably deal with our community here in that way. So we may push even further into the middle of next year, maybe even late summer of next year. But again, those are discussions that we're having right now. But again, it's great for us to be able to have that opportunity to kind of make those incremental pushes along the way. But while we're doing it, like I said, also checking in with everybody else. Because again, just like you said with TIFF, I've been going to TIFF for over a decade. And I love going up there. I love having the opportunity to see films and critics that I know and people in that city. But yeah, you know what? I'm not feeling bad at all about the idea that this might be the first year in a while that I'm not going to be there. I'm really not. I'm like, I'll take my virtual opportunities to see stuff that I can on the P&I side. That's more than enough. I'll write it and cover it as best I can. But yeah, I don't necessarily need to be there.
Well, you know, it's interesting, man. You know, we're talking about TIFF. The whole time you were talking, I was thinking about our encounter on the corner as we were standing in front of the hot dog spot. We were between movies, you know, we were just talking movies, man. We're watching all the activity. What's the name of that street? Is that King Street?
That was King Street, yeah.
Yeah, we're on King Street. So for people who've never been to TIFF, and this is more or less for Charles and our audience, when you go to Toronto, is that the TIFF light box that's on King Street? Am I correct when I say that?
Yes, that is.
Okay.
And again, the light box is, I believe, about 6 years old now, I believe.
Right.
So yeah, before that, you didn't even have that area there at all. Everything was really happening at the multiplex up on, I believe that's on Queen Street.
Right.
A couple blocks up.
Right.
So yeah, that, and again, what we saw and how we experienced that time last year at TIFF That's really what it's about, because they closed King Street off.
They closed King Street off. What is it, about 6 blocks?
Yeah, it's usually
So Charles, think.
Yeah.
6 to 7 blocks of one main thoroughfare is closed down. In the middle of the street, people are walking. Is it the Wales Theaters on one side of the street where they have world premieres on the other side of the street? I forget what's the name of the round.
Roy Thompson's on the other side.
Roy Thompson's on the other side. And the Light Box is one block down. The Light Box, I think, has 4 theaters inside of it, right? Am I correct?
Yeah.
Is it
4 theaters, a couple of bars, restaurants.
You got restaurants. They got food trucks out in the street. So it's a hotbed of activity. And the one night, which really tripped me out, was like, I think that Friday, that opening Friday, they had the world premiere of Dolomite Is My Name at the Princess Wales. Was it Hustlers? The Jennifer Lopez film was across the street. And then they had the Tom Hanks movie, The Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Yes. So all 3 of these movies were literally on the same street with all these casts. So Eddie Murphy, Jennifer Lopez, Tom Hanks. You're across the street at the Light Box. I was standing there with TT. I was like, yeah, man, TIFF is pretty special. I mean, because you don't get that at Sundance. Sundance is literally all about independent films, and you'll have star power there, but you have the studios in Toronto in a way that you don't have at Sundance. And it's a pretty special experience, which is why I was sad, because Charles will tell you, we were talking about bringing Charles up because I wanted to bring a team of people this year to TIFF. And it's, hey, man.
You were going to drive.
Oh, man, I had a ball, man. I drove to Toronto last year. Toronto, it's a nice drive. It's like 8 hours.
Yeah.
You drive up there, you get to Toronto in like 6.5. It'll take you an hour and a half from the border to get to Toronto, because it's not close. It's not like you cross the border and you go into Toronto. Nah, not like that.
Well, see, that's because funny, because I drive up too, but see, I'm driving from Cincinnati, so I hit Detroit. So it's literally a 4-hour drive to Detroit, and then it's 4 hours once you cross over into Windsor, 4 hours from there to get to Toronto. Easy drive. I've done it, like I said, for the last 10 or 11 years.
When you talk to Charles, man, Charles freaked out when I told him, driving.
I didn't freak out because the only time I've ever been to Toronto was when I drove up. Well, my family drove up to Toronto. We've done it through Detroit. Yeah.
It was nice. And then the leaving part was smooth, because I told you, I woke up that morning, I saw Ford versus Ferrari and Joker. And when I walked out the theater, my lady had the car on the next block on Queen Street. I jumped in the car. I was like, see you, Toronto. So words to the wise.
I have done that many times, because I used to, when I first started going, I wouldn't stay for the entire festival. I would come up opening weekend, maybe stay Tuesday, Wednesday, but whatever I did, I would always say, okay, well, let me at least get one movie in if I can in the morning before I leave. So I would get that last film in, and same kind of deal. I'd leave my car parked somewhere close.
Run out of theater and be like, deuces.
It's been good. I'm out of here. One
last comment about TIFF, lesson I learned last year. They sell gas by the liter in Toronto. If you know, like I know, what we did, and I think I talked to you, TT, and you might have advised me this, we filled up the tank. When we got about an hour outside of Canada, we went and filled up again, right? Mm-hmm. And drove the car and parked it, so I didn't have to move the car around. So I never put gas in my car in Toronto, because had we done it, it would have been almost like $4 a gallon. Yeah, gas is pretty expensive in Toronto, so you don't want to do that. You need to get that good USA gas.
and for someone who's not metric system acquainted either, try to get in there and figure out how much you need.
It was like $1.17 a liter, and I was like, how many liters is a gallon? It was like 3. I was like, nah, that's not a good look. So enough of that, man. So what I wanted to bring you on today to talk about, man, is something that's been on my mind for a couple of weeks. And I think it started, TT and Charles, when HBO Max made this move about we're going to take Gone with the Wind off our channel, off our platform.
All right.
I started, and it instantly began me thinking, because I came into the game as a historian, I should say, studying, Michaud and that period in the 20s and the 30s. And then having watched enough classic film, through my love of TCM and just finding old classics. And I'm like, man, if we get to a place where we start looking at things that are maybe a little racist, sexist, misogynistic, man, there would be, I think, 25 to 30% of movies that were released between 1930 or maybe 1920 and 1950. And even into now, there are a lot of movies, man, that we would be having issues with. But what it did have me think about, to kind of expound on a little bit more, is to rethink what we've watched over time and how we let certain things go because we didn't have a climate where we could really say anything about it, right? Especially as a critic of color, that you watch performances or things, sometimes you go, man, that's just not cool. And you kind of dismiss it. So like I used the example on the show, I love The Godfather, but that one scene when the five families are sitting around the table and the guy is, one of the dons stands up and says, we pay our people extra, so they don't have to deal with that stuff. Let the dark people have it. They're animals anyway. Let them lose their soul. And I'm sitting in the theater like, dude, I'm right here. Am I one of the dark people? So it's things like that I've watched for decades. My lady reminded me, she was watching Father of the Bride with Spencer Tracy and Elizabeth Taylor. 1950 film, where at one point she comes in with cold feet and he says, what are you, is it a colored boy? Like, if it was a colored boy, would that be a bad thing? So TT, I'm telling you, I wanted to bring this up to you as a talking point. In this season of reckoning, racial reckoning, as we now are dealing with monuments, Confederate monuments, and different things that are objectionable, how long is it going to be before movies are held under this microscope? And when movies and television, I should add, are held under this microscope, I believe a serious conversation is going to have to go on, man. So what are you thinking?
It's interesting that you started off with one of the most challenging instances in film for me in particular, because I'm a huge fan of The Godfather.
Me too.
And I can almost say that there isn't like a 2-week period that doesn't go by because everything, you can find the little clips on YouTube, that I don't go to that clip of that scene that you're talking about with the families. And because I'm going to that scene because I want to hear Vito get into the whole idea of, I'm a superstitious man, and if anything happens to my son,
right,
he gets shot by a police officer,
or if he should choke on the chicken bone, I will hold somebody in this room responsible.
Right. I love that scene. I know. You can't get to that speech without that earlier part that you're talking about. And yes, every time, even now, every time I hear that, I get the same kind of shock, like, ugh, I love this film, but you're killing me with that. And you're right, we are in a stage where this reckoning has come about that is forcing us to reevaluate things. And again, the interesting part about it, you mentioned TV as well. We're seeing now, for instance, I can't even remember which late night talk show host it was now, but
Jimmy Kimmel.
Jimmy Kimmel, again, all of the blackface stuff that
and
comes
Fallon,
up. So
Fallon
now
has already apologized. Right.
Everybody's trying to get ahead of that by saying, oh, wait a minute, I did this before. I'm apologizing for it. Friends, as a matter of fact, I just read, they've taken off blackface episodes where they had characters from the show who appeared on blackface. Those are now no longer available on Netflix. So again, we're seeing that happening. Part of my question, and again, I think what you're getting at is, you're right. If we do that at every stage of the game and throughout the history of film and television, instead of talking about those moments and really addressing them, why did you need to do that? What does this really mean? but just to axe them out without any discussion about them at all or any historical context for them is a problem. And again, you've seen, I think HBO Max has already gone ahead and said that they're going to reintroduce Gone with the Wind, but they're going to put some disclaimers on it, right, and hopefully try to use that as an opportunity to spark conversation, right, about the film as you move forward. And I think that's kind of in part what's going to have to happen, because I feel, and again, as you know, this is a slight shift in the discussion a bit, but in terms of our festival here, like I said, we focus primarily on disability. Right. And in the exact same way with disability, even before I started working with this festival, my pre-film job, I was an employment training specialist in Philadelphia. So I supported people with disabilities and then moved into staff training. And one of the things that I would do as part of my staff trainings, I would show movie clips and talk about how are we looking at people with disabilities as they're portrayed on screen. So in the 90s, you had the Forrest Gumps and Rain Man and those kind of portrayals. And, here I was, this, 20-something kid right out of college, working in this field, already decrying the idea that, wait a minute, why are we celebrating Dustin Hoffman and Tom Hanks in these roles that are not necessarily accurate portrayals of people with disabilities. Right. And the concern is, at least for Black people throughout our history, it's taken us a long time, but we have been able to figure out how to get into the system and tell our own stories, right, at different phases throughout film history. People with disabilities don't necessarily have that. So again, that places far more of a responsibility on the people who are telling those stories to try to do the best they can to come up with accurate reflections of people with disabilities in the community. And we're seeing that now. If you watch, again, I was just talking about this earlier this week, a show like Rami. The second season of Rami just came out, and one of the characters on that show is one of his friends that he's known since he was a kid growing up in New Jersey, who happens to have a disability. Right. And whenever you see that character, he is just treated just like any of the other friends. He gets his own storylines. And you are looking at a guy who's in a wheelchair, but who's talking openly about sexuality and drug use or whatever else is going on, and treated just like everybody else. Right. So obviously the team behind Rami really thought that through very carefully and could figure out a way to incorporate that guy's story into the broader context of things. Our problem historically has been white filmmakers haven't necessarily done the same thing with us. Mm. And that's where we have, the tension and the problems that exist. But again, the reality was, at some point, we always knew we could figure out how to tell our own stories. Right. Which made a big difference. Again, the idea of the Rami example that I just brought up, Rami's great, but that show is not based on the character with the disability. Right. So, when are we going to see more of those kind of stories told from his perspective or her perspective, and then open it up so that we can all say, okay, yeah, that's the character that we're following all the way through. Those are the kinds of things that we need to think about. And again, until we're able to do that, this slapping people on the wrist and pulling films out of circulation, it's not really going to address the problem.
Well, it's funny, man. We got 1 minute left on this Zoom. I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen because I'm going to push the limit, man. So if it cuts me off, I'll just have to drop the money, and we will have to upgrade the game. But this is a great conversation. Charles, do you have anything?
We got unlimited minutes. I don't know if you might have missed the notice, but we good. We're good.
All right, go ahead, man. So Charles, you got anything for TT?
I did for a second, and then he covered it pretty well. And the parallels between the world of the disabled and the world of the African American, he drew very well. And it's like you said, we're making our own opportunities to tell our stories. So a lot of those things are being addressed. To me, I believe every movie is a snapshot of a time, of a sensibility, and for us to just automatically throw it out because it's offensive is not addressing what were they thinking about when they made the movie. What were the things behind making that scene that they put in that seems so offensive. In your case, the scene from The Godfather, but there's lots of movies that we can go through all throughout the history of cinema, and there are reasons why that they're there, and maybe sometime we need to talk about what was the impetus behind that, and maybe expand our horizons to understand that they didn't have to go that way in that time, and they won't go that way in the future. So, I mean, to me, movies are about talking, about dialogue, about understanding somebody else's point of view. And sometimes we need to sit down and stop arguing at people and start listening to what they had to say about what was going on when they make that movie.
Well, you know what I was going to say when you talked about disabilities, because I know the conversation is going in there's like two, diverging or diverging streams, I should just say. I started off talking about images of African Americans, but since you are a person who runs a film festival that's centered around disabilities, the classic movie that I think really kind of was an early kind of front runner that kind of explains a lot of this was a film from 1944, The Best Years of Our Lives, where you had the character who came back and had lost both his hands, and how he was able to have a girlfriend who kind of understood the frustration. So they made him a very three-dimensional character. I also think about the Jane Fonda, John Voight film Coming Home from 1979, which is another huge film about disabilities. And then I would also add another one, The Water Dance with Wesley Snipes from 1992. I want to think that is. So, I'm always, so, I am a programmer as well, as TT and Charles as well. So, we as film professionals understand these genres, and we kind of think through our mental Rolodexes, like, well, what are there, where are these examples that we can draw from? And there's so many different films that deal with different sensibilities of disability, that you can talk about the mental aspect of it, which is something entirely different. You could deal with the physical aspect of it. I remember being at your film festival, and TT and his team grabbed me to do a Q&A, which was hilarious for a movie I was watching. And I think, wasn't he on the board of LAD, this judge who you had me do the Q&A with?
Might have been, if I'm not
from Michigan. So yeah. I get up to do this Q&A. I have no prep time. I go, and the guy is blind. And so the first question he always goes, so you saw the movie? You didn't see it. So that was an interesting, but I mean, we got through it because I'm a pro, but it's very interesting, man, to be thrust on the spot on these things, man, but also to understand that there's a certain level of sensitivity that has to go in to a lot of these things. And I'm just a natural guy that likes to have fun, TT. So sometimes, including that night, I had to limit my amount of fun and just let him do what he did. But nah, brother, I feel you, man. But I think that when we talk about disabilities, I definitely wanted to stay on the topic of these films. And I think that, for an example, every August, Turner Classic Movies does something they call August Under the Stars, where they'll take one star or director and they will feature 24 hours of that person's work. And it's going to be interesting now that we're in the midst of this pandemic, what direction they're going to go. Because generally, as a rule, they'll usually have like a black person or two. They usually get Sidney Poitier. I think they've tried Diane Carroll. The problem you run into with some Under the Stars, when you're talking about classic films, there's not like a lot of black people who had 24 hours worth of work from that time period. So I get what the challenge is of what they're trying to do. But TT, I swear to you, they're going to try to find a way, because they've got to, in this current environment, to showcase some classic work from some Black people, whether it's, you know, Portier again, whether it's you move that time period up into the 70s. I don't know what you do, but you gotta find a way to spotlight people of color, man, in a series like that.
Right. I mean, part of what it sounds like may happen, you may find ways either thematically to, you know, pull in performances or narratives and have multiple actors along the way that you can kind of work into that, you know, or again, and I feel like we see this a lot just because, you know, the idea of a classic now kind of changes generationally speaking. Right. You know, if you want to look at, and again, I'm not saying that they're going to do this, but for instance, you know, classics today, you know, if I ask my kids what a classic happens to be, and my kids are, you know, late teens, early 20s, they're going to say maybe the 80s if I'm lucky. You know, 70s, 80s might be classic for them. So,
Purple
yeah,
Rain.
if you do that, then all of a sudden, you can throw in Denzel, and there's tons of Denzel material that could fill a 24-hour, you know, slot of time. But that, again, for us in a more purist kind of sense, that's not going to feel classic. But again, those are the ways that you kind of tweak those things a bit to make sure that you find opportunities. But again, it does highlight the real point moving forward for the industry that, okay, yeah, we have to figure out how do we extend and offer those opportunities and make sure that people are going to be seen and represented enough that, yes, 25 years from now, the next time you have to try to figure this question out, all of a sudden, yeah, you're going to have a wider range of people that you can go to say, okay, well, yeah, here, I'll do this, and I can find I can program 24 hours with Michael B. Jordan.
Right.
Or by that point, you know, the classic idea, yeah, you'll have, you know, Samuel L. Jackson and Morgan Freeman who will, you know, will be considered classic in that longer standing kind of way. So we'll have their works. But again, you're right. That is kind of the problem, trying to figure that out.
Yeah, man. So we got about 2 minutes in this segment, TT. So when you say trying to figure it out, you got Paul Robeson, who, you know, did Body and Soul 1925, The Emperor Jones, Stagecoach, which is a movie that I literally almost destroyed my television because when I had to sit there and listen to him sing Old Man River and Dark East coming up, I was like, oh my God, stop it. You know, you've got Rex Ingram. I mean, so I know the names, which is why I understand the frustration where people are always getting Cabin in the Sky and Stormy Weather. You had a period pre-Sidney Poitier, 1 year before Sidney Poitier's debut film in 1949. There were 4 titles that were released that year. I've seen them all: Intruder in the Dust, Home of the Brave, Pinky. And then there's one more, which name escapes me, about a really fair-skinned African-American family passing for white, and the racial kind of confusion that goes on in their family, and then when they're discovered. I can't remember that one, but I've seen all 4 of these movies. So to me, historically, Hollywood has always been a troubling place when it comes to my heritage. And there have been times when I've had to look the other way, pretend I didn't see what I saw. Because or use the phrase I say a lot on this show that, you know, you got to watch these movies with 1930s eyes. You can't watch them with 2020 eyes, because if you do, it'll. So basically, when you hear me say that, yeah, that movie bothered me a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I think just for me, the one last thing I would add about what you just said, and which I think is interesting, and we all do it, but you referred to Hollywood as the example that we're talking about in terms of the industry. I think you have just as many problems when you move away from the traditional Hollywood industry and just, again, look at the independent world as well, because as often as we talk about and we're concerned about how Hollywood treats us, even more recently in the last 30 or 40 years, the concern for me is on the independent side. You know, you may have had a few Black filmmakers who were working on that side, but largely the celebrated white filmmakers who are also working and doing great indie work at that time were not featuring us either.
No.
So really, that's the thing. And again, I feel like to a certain extent, we we almost try to separate those two out. But really, in reality, Hollywood and the indie world as well, we're really both operating under the same principles. They just, again, it's a lot of the, again, political discussions that we're having in the world today, sort of the idea of the question of being liberal or progressive or whatever else. I'm sure the indie world would imagine itself to be more progressive on these things.
Right.
But in truth, they were not at all. And that's what this particular moment is really spotlighting. It's really shining a very harsh light on everyone in the mainstream to say, yeah, you weren't really as liberal or progressive as you thought you were. So what are you going to do about it now?
Right. All right, TT. So you can hang out, man, because we got about 10 minutes left, man. And I wanted to talk about these documentaries I watched this weekend, including John Lewis' Good Trouble, directed by Dawn Porter. Have you had an opportunity to see it yet?
I have not seen it yet, but I have a long queue of films to check out, and that's in my queue right now.
Charles, what about you? Have you seen it?
No, I have not.
All right. So let me do this, man. All right. So every week we normally, when I'm about to do a review, it'd be like, all right, welcome back to the to this segment. Coming up, we're gonna review films. We're not doing any of that, man. So y'all figure out that we're talking about movies right now. But I had the opportunity to finally watch John Lewis' Good Trouble, which was, I think, almost close to a 2-hour documentary about the extraordinary life of Congressman John Lewis, who started off as a civil rights activist out of Troy, Alabama, born in 1940, had aspirations of being a minister when he was a child. He tells a famous story several times in the documentary that as a kid, he would put on his dress clothes and go out with his Bible out to the chicken pen and would preach sermons to the chickens. And he said sometimes they would raise their heads and some would lower their heads and they wouldn't have a lot to say. And he just preached the word to them. After the death of Emmett Till, his life sort of took a turn and he wrote a personal letter to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And Dr. King, who to his dying day called John Lewis the boy from Troy. You the boy from Troy? So he went to work with Dr. King. When he was 22 years old, he gave a speech at the March of Washington prior to Dr. King that a lot of people didn't know, including myself. And it talks about his life. But the thing that's interesting about this documentary is when I watched it, it had me go back and watch an earlier documentary that featured John Lewis that was made back in 2018 called Bobby Kennedy for President. I don't know if any of you guys saw that. So this is the same filmmaker, and she's just taken I guess what she saw when you watch the 2018 doc, Bobby Kennedy for President, you'll see that John Lewis is featured prominently in that as a friend of Bobby, and then she just told John Lewis the story. But I'm going to tell you what, man, it's a 4-episode arc, Bobby Kennedy for President, right? And in the 3rd episode, after Robert Kennedy has been shot at the Ambassador Hotel, and they get John Lewis's recollection, and it literally made me cry. I was at work yesterday, fighting back tears, listening to John Lewis talk about how losing the Reverend Martin Luther King on April 4th, 1968, and Robert Kennedy on June the 5th, almost like 2 months and a day to the day that Dr. King dies, Bobby Kennedy dies, or is shot the same day, 2 months apart. And how he breaks down in tears, TT, saying it's just too much, man. He's like, what is happening to our country? It's just too much, like this level of hope that's lost in this short amount of time. I thought the John Lewis documentary was really, really strong. But I will say that when it comes to documentaries about the struggle, my platinum documentary is the James Baldwin Raoul Peck documentary, I Am Not Your Negro. Mm-hmm. That is the standard that I hold all my civil rights documentaries to. So your documentary is good. It ain't I Am Not Your Negro good. And that's sort of how I feel about the John Lewis doc. I think that there's a lot of good stuff in there about his affiliations, not just with, folks like Medgar Evers and Andrew Young and Jesse Jackson. Elijah Cummings, the late congressman from Maryland, is the first person you see on camera, which was also like, wow, man. So him, James Clyburn, you know, senator from South Carolina. There are so many connections and people that John Lewis has touched over the years, man, including Julian Bond, who they show you in the documentary. The two of them ran for office against each other after having they've known each other for 25 years, and they squared off against each other, which put a strain on their relationship. That's in the documentary. I just thought that Dawn Porter, who I reached out to earlier today, I'm like, sister, I got to talk to you because your documentaries are soul stirring. They are very well thought out. She does a really good job. And unlike somebody, I will just throw out a name, Stanley Nelson, who I'm sure you've met TT over the years. And Charles, I'm not sure you know who Stanley is, right? Who turns out doc after doc. And he's got like this, you know, almost Ford auto assembly line of like, you know, I got one documentary out now, but I got another team out researching. Dawn Porter, man, put this documentary together, man. And there's so much footage and there's so much different insights that are in it. I just thought she did an amazing job. If I had to give it a grade, man, I would give the John Lewis doc probably a B+. Bobby Kennedy for president, I thought that one, man, you know, me and my lady watched it. She was crying too when I was sitting there like, wow. It is very, her documentaries are very emotional when you watch them, of putting you in a place that despite this is something that's happened 52 years ago, it hits you right now. And then I think it also works, both of you guys, so well because of where we are now as a country. And for people who claim they've never seen this before, you know, I made the joke a couple of shows ago that we've got like 1918, 1929, and 1968 all happening at the same time. You've got a situation where 1968 was the last time that we had a situation like that, but instead of innocent young Black people being killed, it was leaders that were being shot down. So there was mass death going on around the country. You know, when we had a president now who wants to be the law and order president, that was the rallying cry in 1968 because the country seemed like it was coming apart, man, that we needed law and order. You had real riots, not like these fake riots that people tell you that are happening. There were real riots that were happening in America. So I think to me, part of what makes the Lewis documentary now, and then when you go back and you rewatch Bobby Kennedy for president, it makes it resonate so much is because of it gives the similarities to the period and also should give you hope to understand that no matter how bad it feels right now, we've been here before. It's painful right now and it's uncomfortable, but we're going to get through this together. That as long as we keep our heads, it's not the end of the world. It's going to be okay. So those are my thoughts about those documentaries. And I would encourage you. I think John Lewis, Good Trouble, I don't know if it's on Amazon or not. I don't know what platform it's on. But it is definitely worth your watch. And John Lewis, as I wrote in a post, he's an amazing individual and a personal hero. And I'm in my mid-50s, and TT, I swear to you, I don't know, Charles, I don't know if given the option that I could have been that nonviolent guy. It's a certain level of courage that one has to do what not just John Lewis, but that entire generation of activists, what they were able to do. But we now live in a world that we benefit a lot on the changes that all those people, we stand on their shoulders, and we owe them a debt of gratitude, which is why I have so much love for John Lewis and that generation, because I don't even know if I would have been able to. I'm being honest. I don't know.
I think it also is like we talked about movies in their context. We have to talk. That's one of the things that's great is that we have these times where we can look at these movies and see the context of what they were going through at the time to understand why they acted the way they did, how they protested the way they protested, how they spoke the way they spoke. Because again, as a man of this generation, I'm like you. I don't see how they could have done it, how they could have been nonviolent, how they could have been, and there were groups that were violent, But yeah, it's the same thing. You just look at it and you say, man, if it wasn't for a documentary like this to give me some insight, you know, all right, I'm sorry.
We gotta go. Man, I love all you brothers. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week. TT, thank you. Charles, thank you. And we will see you guys on the other side. Take care, gentlemen.
All right.
All right.